We are now a month into this fighting and chaos in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine and Hamas and Hezbollah and Lebanon and Yemen and the Houthis and the Iranians, and a conflict that is seemingly escalating out of control and perhaps edging towards World War III, something that I've been warning about now for a very long time. And the United States, and specifically their new Speaker of the House, has taken it upon themselves to funnel $14 billion worth of aid to Israel. What use is this going to have in this conflict apart from ramping up the violence and ramping up the hostility? And what makes this particularly interesting in this case, because we're used to massive chunks of money being funneled into the military-industrial complex without any scent of accountability whatsoever. But what makes this instance particularly interesting is the fact that this has happened just literally hours after Israel admitted that it had bombed a refugee camp not once but twice to get an alleged Hamas leader that was in that camp. So what does this say to Israel and the Israeli government? It's saying that you have a blank check. You can do whatever the hell you want. And you can have Antony Blinken go over to Israel and make all these public statements about the need to wage war within accepted international guidelines and that you need to try to prevent civilian casualties whenever possible. If that's your rhetoric, you need to match that with reality, which this does not do. This says to Israel, go ahead, do whatever the hell you want, because by the way, we're going to keep funding it. This is a disaster. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new here on YouTube or on my page on X, where I'm also now posting full videos. Please do hit the follow button. I've got lots more to come, and I'm approaching these issues from a critical angle where we're not really trying to take sides. We're trying to take a step back and say, wait a second, let's put the brakes on. Can we do this any better than we're currently doing it? Because this is evidently a disaster. But we do have this new Speaker of the House. Went through this long, drawn-out process once again, just a year after this had already occurred with the Republicans that are in evidently a complete state of political disarray right now. But we get this new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and there's a sense of excitement that he's going to come in and he's going to get the government working again and it's going to work for the American people. And this is the first thing that he does. This is a country that has record high rents, hundreds of thousands of homeless people, including tens of thousands of American military veterans, nonetheless, and a country that spent $8 trillion on the war on terror. And what did that get the United States? Absolutely nothing. It got it in Iraq that ended up aligning itself with Iran. It got the rise of ISIS. And it got the complete destruction of Afghanistan and then the return, of course, of the Taliban government. It got drone strikes throughout the region that killed endless numbers of civilians, including wedding parties on multiple occasions. And we're just heading down the same road once again. All of the lessons that should have been learned from the war on terror, from the post 9/11 era, we're just laying them out, laying out the red carpet, and we're just following that path once again, aren't we? That's exactly what is going on here. And this is becoming a big issue, particularly for Israel on an international level, because Israel absolutely suffered a horrific terrorist attack from Hamas. There's no denying that whatsoever. And they should have responded to that, and they should have responded to Hamas. They should not have responded with what, at this point, you can really only call collective punishment on 2.2 million people. They have now lost any moral high ground that they may have had, any political capital that they could have had from the aftermath of this devastating terrorist attack. And now we have vast numbers of people that have almost forgotten why Gaza is under attack in the first place. And in fact, Antony Blinken said this earlier today. He said that people are starting to forget why Israel is at war with Gaza. And why is that? Well, because of what they are doing in Gaza. This unabashed carpet bombing, shooting anything that moves approach, which of course is being disastrous for civilians. And something else that's really being exposed here, which I think is probably most important really for the Western world, is that in the alternative media, we often talk about this gap between the elites in charge and the people, and the fact that the elites in charge often do things that most people don't really support or don't really have any understanding of why the elites are doing this. This particular international crisis is exposing that divide really unlike anything before. We have a poll that came out just a couple of weeks ago now, probably about a week and a half ago, that found 66% of Americans want a ceasefire in Gaza and Israel. They do not want $14 billion of their money funneled into the military-industrial complex to buy more bombs to continue fighting a war which is evidently achieving absolutely nothing except the complete obliteration of civilians on both sides. And when we do think about this on this broader level of what's a proportionate response to an attack and what is the right move to make and how should you respond to something like this, because again, as I've said in all of my coverage on this issue, countries absolutely do have a right to defend themselves. You can't really be a pacifist entirely in this world. You should be anti-militarist in the sense of you should not support offensive military actions to achieve your goals because that's violence, it's destruction, it's wrong. But if you are attacked, you should be able to respond to that. Well, a question that I have seen Israeli officials pose to media commentators time after time after time now in response to this is, it basically goes like this. Well, if you wouldn't carpet bomb Gaza, if you wouldn't wipe all of these towns and cities and people off the face of the earth, what would you do instead? Well, unfortunately, Israel has exposed itself with the bombing of this refugee camp on that particular issue. Because if you knew that there was a high-level Hamas leader in that refugee camp, that means that your surveillance, your intelligence, that must be working, right? Because you know where these people are. So if you know where these people are, why can you not send in a special forces team to take them out? Why can you not use a sniper to take them out? Both of which have been used against other groups in this region rather significantly over recent history, including journalists that have found themselves being sniped by the IDF, of which there are multiple cases of this occurring, and very recent instances of this as well that are very fresh in the memory. So this is now the answer, and Israel has kind of stepped on its own foot here by admitting that they did strike this refugee camp, and yeah, we did kill a bunch of civilians, but we got this Hamas leader. Well, that's not acceptable. Ever. We have to draw the line at this. You cannot just say, there's a bad guy in this group of 500 people, let's bomb all of them. That is unacceptable. That is not how warfare is supposed to be conducted. The word discrimination has this really negative connotation in most aspects of politics and society. In warfare, discrimination is exactly what you are supposed to be exercising. You're supposed to be discriminating between the enemies and everybody else. And everybody else is not supposed to feel the wrath of warfare. This is basic, stated, internationally accepted rules on how we're supposed to conduct wars on this planet, because unfortunately they're not really going anywhere, are they? So it does help to have some rules, and this is a clear violation of all of that. And what has also happened, we've had multiple countries that have cut diplomatic ties with Israel as a result of this, and politically speaking, Israel is really on the back foot right now as a result of this incident. But again, clearly, the US government doesn't care. The majority of Republicans in the House do not care. They're willing to support this because they have just started the motions of writing a $14 billion check to continue this sort of thing. Instead of having a ceasefire, instead of bringing both sides to a negotiating table, just keep blowing each other up. Because that's been working really well up until this point, hasn't it? This has really worked out well for both of these groups of people. It's been a complete disaster, and it's been a complete disaster for well over 100 years. This did not start post-World War II, as many of the history books would have you believe. This goes far further back than that. I could honestly sit here and continue ranting and raving on this for a lot longer, but I think it's about time we wrap this one up. Be sure to subscribe if you're new here. I'm going to continue to cover this conflict from this critical perspective, which is going to call out wrongdoing on both sides. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Israel's current operations in Gaza are clearly collective punishment. We can say both things. All sides should be criticized, and I would advise all of you out there, do not take a side in this. There is no side to be taken here, except perhaps the side, if you can call it that, that's looking for peace. Follow the page, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back with more soon.